right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. If this is your first time joining us, we are all about bringing science, adventure, exploration, and conservation live into classrooms across North America and beyond. So head over to exploringbytheseat.com. You can find 30, 40, 50 or more live events a month for your classrooms to join in on and meet amazing people all around our planet. So this month we've been celebrating conservation, talking to scientists, explorers, and conservationists who have dedicated their life to protecting ecosystems as well as the species found within them. And we're going to continue on with an amazing event. We're heading live to the United Kingdom to spend a little time with Paul Rose. Paul is at the front line of exploration, one of the world's most experienced divers, field scientists, and polar experts. He helps scientists unlock and communicate global mysteries in the most remote and challenging regions of the planet. He's also an experienced television presenter and radio broadcaster. So Paul is currently the expedition leader for the National Geographic Pristine Seas expeditions. They've completed over 31 expeditions, helping to create marine reserves and over 6 million square kilometers of the world's pristine ocean ecosystems. So I'm going to bring the man in himself. Paul, how are you doing today, Paul?
Hi, Joe. Great to see you again. And thanks, everybody, for joining us here in England. I'm in my kit store. And I normally would be at sea, of course, but at the minute I'm having the opportunity to sort all of the gear out. So rarely does it look so organized or indeed dry.
Absolutely. Well, I can only imagine the gear and the places that it's been that you have in that room. It's pretty awesome. Paul, we've got classrooms joining us across North America. They're tuning in via YouTube. I can see them saying hi already. So keep doing that. Let us know where you're tuning in from. And we've got an awesome group of students live on camera with us who are going to just pepper you with questions after you share some of your, your action with Pristine Seas.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Joe. And I must say, everybody, it's been brilliant doing these sessions with Joe. Normally, Joe and I connect while I'm at sea. And what a gift that is. You know, I can be at sea with the team at the start and usually at the end of the expedition, and we can share our new discoveries and anticipation and even questions when we're finding things that we don't yet understand. We've had a lot of success sharing it with everybody and saying, well, what do you think this is? We've got no idea. So we really like these kinds of sessions, and it's a real joy to join you all from here at home. I'm going to share my screen so I can show some images. It just takes a second to get it set up. Great, I think we're in. Okay, here we go, everybody. So, yeah, my name's Paul Rose, and I'm an explorer. But mostly, I think if you were to slice me down and say, well, what's inside Paul Rose? It's the diver. I just love being a diver. And as a young boy, I wasn't very good at school, and I reached this threshold around about 11 years old where I was having trouble in school. I couldn't read very well. I didn't like the teachers much. I didn't seem to be learning anything off of the board or out of these books. But on television, my diving heroes were having a great time. Jacques Cousteau was traveling around the world on Calypso and having great global adventures. I didn't really know what science he was doing, but he looked like he was having a great time. Hans and Lottie Haas were taking these fantastic pictures underwater. And I still remember some of those early shark pictures, which today we look back at these pictures and they're a bit grainy and black and white and everything. But my real hero was Mike Nelson. He's a fictional character in a television show called Sea Hunt. And every week he was popping up on my television screen, having amazing adventures underwater. And I remember thinking, wow, I just want to be a diver. And I can still remember that moment because at last, it wasn't the schoolwork that I had to be good at. I just needed to learn enough to run away from school and become a diver. And that's all I had in my mind, was to become a diver. Fortunately, I did become a diver, and that led to me also becoming a mountain guide and a polar guide. So I made the jump from a young boy who couldn't even get through one single class at school to being a professional diver and a professional polar guide. And I did that by just following my dream. I just never wavered from that. I didn't want to work in an office. I couldn't, in fact. I didn't want to work in a factory, although I worked in a factory for many years to earn money enough to be able to get professional training. And by the time I was 29, I was a professional diver and a professional guide, and I've never looked back since. I've been fortunate. I guide in the polar regions, and here we are in Greenland, coming to the top of Gumbionsfjeld, which is the highest in the Arctic. And when you look at all those peaks in the distance and do a whole 360 and look around, about 90% of the peaks that you're looking at there have never been properly mapped, surveyed, photographed, or climbed or named. It really does still today have the sense of a genuinely unexplored, beautiful region. I like the long, flat traverses. I've skied across the Greenland Icecap a number of times, leading groups, and it's a month. It takes about 30 days, and it's just one long, straight line, which is a bit of a mindless physical grunt day after day, and I turn out to be really good at that. I can keep going on those flat, mindless projects, no problem whatsoever. This work then led to my work in science support. You know, scientists, when they're in the deep field projects, it could be in a desert, could be in a jungle, at sea, or in a polar region. They need a lot of support, and they need people like me. I'm not a scientist, but I can put together all of the logistics that make science happen. So it's a real joy to meet science teams with a hypothesis, you know, a big idea, and convert that idea into remote camps like this on the Taylor Glacier in the Dry Valley in Antarctica, or research stations. This is my old research station in Antarctica, Rothera base, and I'm sure you'll agree that the most beautiful research station on the planet. Or indeed turning those ideas and hypotheses into aircraft and ship operations in remote places. And of course, beautiful camps and small projects. It's a very satisfying project, I must say, to meet these scientists. A lot of the projects are ready to go. They've done so much field work that you know exactly, even down to the food and fuel and the travel and everything else. But some projects just present me with a big equation as to why we're going to collect ancient methane from the ice or something. And it's a very satisfying job for someone like me. I'm no scientist, but I do know the logistics and can put them together. So it's something you might want to remember if you're thinking about a career in exciting places, but you don't feel like being a scientist. Then why not be a mechanic or a plumber or electrician or a doctor or a pilot or a boat driver, and get yourself jobs in these amazing places doing something called science support. So then some years later, in fact, 7 years ago now, after all of that, what to do? And I was very lucky and extraordinarily happy to meet a man called Henrik Saller, who started this project, National Geographic Pristine Seas. He was a professor at Scripps University, and he had this thought, and it's a great thing he said. He said, you know, every science paper I wrote felt like it was an obituary for the ocean. People were coming up with ideas about the ocean and raising awareness about the main stresses of the ocean, you know, climate change, overfishing and pollution, but there wasn't enough action. So he started this project called Pristine Seas to find, explore, and help protect the last wild places in the ocean. And as Joe says, you can see we've been busy. We've got 30 expeditions. We've created 22 marine reserves, 115 science publications. The science team are very busy, and that's up to over 120 now. And on the little circle on the left there, it says more than 5 million square kilometres. We're now well over 6 million square kilometres of the ocean protected. And Joe, I wonder if you could just run the film, please.
The big fish are gone. They have been fished out.
And it only takes a few fishing boats, and they can remove hundreds of years of biomass in just a very short period of time.
After 10 years as a professor, I realized that I was just writing the obituary of the ocean. I quit academia and assembled a team to do something about it. I want to show to the world what the ocean was like hundreds of years ago and why we have to preserve them.
What we do is hunt out the last pristine places in the ocean and protect them.
The ocean has amazing regenerative power. We just need to let it heal itself.
The moment I set my eyes on these remote islands, I know why we're here.
So you can imagine that's what it looks like when we're at sea, but it starts like so many things with maps and bits of sticky paper, and inevitably we're a National Geographic project. Every once in a while we all get together with the great world maps and lots of stickers, and we work out two main columns. We work out the scientific need of each destination, and that's a big job. And then we work along in parallel with it another column, which is the political opportunity. You know, where is the right setting and where are the right global leaders with the right ambitions to make this happen? And now, of course, we have a third column running, which is what's going to happen after COVID, you know, the post-COVID recovery. So like so many of us, we're paused at the moment and we'll be back at sea next autumn, approximately next September. But we're now juggling three columns instead of two. So after we've got this together and we've all had a chance to meet up and work out where we're going to go, the next job is to get the ship. I always dreamed that somehow we would have a pristine sea ship, and we would take that thing around the world, going from cool destination to cool destination. But it's not practical, because you see some targets of ours have to be run very close to the same date. So you go from one to the other, and we could never get the ship moving fast enough and for it to be the right seasons and the right setup. So what we do is we charter vessels of all kinds. This was the James Clark Ross, which we chartered 2 years ago for the Ascension Island expedition. We sometimes have relatively small, almost luxury yachts like the Plan B. And one of our most favorites is the Argo. It's one of the smallest vessels we work on, but she's designed completely to be a diving vessel. So everywhere you go, there's a place for your gear. It's very easy to charge your batteries. It's set up perfectly as a dive boat. So we love to work on the Argo. And as you can see there, the yellow submarine at the bottom of the image, that's the deep sea submarine, and the Argo is the home to deep sea. So it means we can work down at 400 meters. So yeah, any chance we get to work on the Argo is great for us. So once we're on board, the expedition begins to feel alive. Some of these expeditions take many years to put together. You can imagine the paperwork, the permits, getting everybody ready, getting all the kit in the right place, doing all the science, organizing things with our host country partners. And there's always a wonderful moment for me when I travel a bit early to the vessel and it begins to look like this. All of the equipment begins to arrive and get unpacked, and the whole thing begins to feel alive. You can see in the background there our Zodiacs are inflated with the engines on. This red thing here is the recompression chamber, which is part of our diving support equipment. And inevitably, it's the whiteboards. You know, I've been leading expeditions for all of my life. And no matter how much technology has changed and how much opportunity there is to not use whiteboards, we can never escape using whiteboards. So we love them because there's a chance. And this great picture shows you there, in the back, that's Alan Friedlander, the blue shirt. And just on the front here is Emmanuel Gonzalez from one of our partners, Oceana Azul in Portugal, just working out and agreeing where we're going to go each day and how we're going to make each day work. So my top tip is make sure you get yourself a job in science support. And tip number 2 is don't travel anywhere without a whiteboard. We sometimes even need a basic reminder, and this is Alan Friedlander again, our chief scientist at Malpelo, tiny island in Colombian waters, giving us a quick reminder as to what we're going to do at each depth. Eventually, after all of the planning, all of the travel, all of the shipping, and all of the loading, we get to sea, and then comes the moment when we all jump in the water. So we're all super keen, very enthusiastic divers who love to be underwater. So you can imagine that moment when sometimes we're lucky enough to dive in a place where very few people have ever been, and often enough, no one has ever dived there. Now, I often get the question as to how do we know that a place really is pristine? Well, there's lots of scientific measures with pristine. One of the most important is the numbers of top predators. So if we see lots of sharks, it's a great sign. And I tell you, it is very exciting to jump in the sea and realize, wow, we're surrounded by hundreds of sharks. So we're not the top of the food chain anymore. That's an exciting moment. But what I normally like to do is look at Alan, and there he is swimming with the seals. And by looking at Alan's body language and how he is in that first minute of the dive, I can tell if he's happy, and therefore if he's happy, the place is probably pristine. So we begin all of our surveys, and the science surveys mean swimming around, counting fish, counting all the life, and recording all of it. It's a big job. To help us, we use some remote cameras. These cameras here are our pelagic cameras, and we normally set them up in about 25 meters, 75 feet of water. And they can hang there for hours and just record what comes swimming by. So it's a brilliant way of recording hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fish of all kinds whizzing past. And they can stay down longer than we can. So we love the pelagic cameras. And for the very deep work, we use these guys. These are drop cameras. They go all the way to what they go full depth. We've had them down to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, the deepest part of the ocean, and back up again, of course. They go down and sit there for any number of hours. We can have them down for 2 hours or all day if we want, and they film what comes past. And we've had some amazing results from the drop cameras. But you can't go wrong with us diving. This is one of our pictures from Rappaiti in the French Polynesia. And there was a question there about illegal longline fishing. So when we're in there and we come across these amazingly beautiful, sleek Galapagos sharks and can show photographs of them with long lines still hanging in them, it's absolute undeniable proof that there is illegal fishing going on in these waters. Similarly, if I can go down in the submarine, there's me with John there. He's filming me and I'm reporting from depth. So that means I can report news and science and what's going on from depth. And of course, even better is when the scientists are in there. You can just about see Shmulik in the back there underneath the microphone. He's the submarine pilot, and we can normally have 2 scientists in the front, and they can go down to about 400 meters for about 3 hours at a time, looking at that depth at things that have never been seen before. So at the surface, near the surface, we've got all the scuba work going down to about 50 meters or so. Then we do occasional very deep dives down to about 100 meters. And then for the real deep work, we use the submarines down to 400 meters. And then for the very deep work, we've got the drop cameras. So we really can cover the entire water column. And one of the most effective things we can do regarding protection is get country leaders and influencers in the submarine. And it's usually the first time they've been in the submarine. It's very often the first time they've seen their waters in so much detail that they can fall in love with them. There's that wonderful moment, isn't there, when we always say, you can't protect it if you haven't fallen in love with it. And this is a great thing. So you can imagine then the political leader coming back up, having had a great dive in their waters and wanting to protect it. So then the messages that she or he put out to their country is that, hey, I've just dived our amazing waters. They are fabulous and beautiful. and we need to protect them. So it's a very effective way of communicating the value of their waters. The other thing, of course, is we work with Joe, the great man Joe Grabowski, who's pulling this together. It's brilliant to be able to be at sea and speak to the whole world. Years ago, this was impossible. I remember so many of my early expeditions where the scientists would make significant discoveries, but not be able to share them for many months when we got back. So this is what it looks like. It's fun because classrooms and groups around the world are looking at us like that. Here's what it looks like from our side. To try and use only a small amount of bandwidth, we normally duct tape my iPhone to the tripod. You can just about see it taped on there. And there's Emmanuel and Jen speaking to the camera. And it means that we can get behind us all kinds of people. So I can have the ship's captain or the chef or any of the ship's team, science members of all kinds, boat drivers, and we can answer and share discoveries and answer questions from anybody around the world. So science communication from the field is absolutely vital these days, as you well know. Normally, we work in places that are very remote, that don't have much of a population. But when we're in a destination that there is a population, it's so great to be able to have young ones on board. So here we are with schools from the Azores in Portugal coming on board. It's wonderful when they can come on the ship, and here they are working with Paleo and actually being along with us for a day. And all of this is so essential because we've got this big target. There's a big global target that you're no doubt aware of, and it's called, can we protect 30% of the planet by 2030? You will see it online shortened as 30 by 30, because the scientists now all agree internationally that for the planet to be completely sustainable, the very minimum we should protect is 30%. So it's a real beautiful target. And the way to do that is to somehow share the challenge and share the knowledge as widely as we can. So if we've got young ones involved right from the beginning, and you're joining us now, we can help get your enthusiasm and knowledge to help us get for Campaign for Nature 30% by 2030. And I'm often asked, after all of this lifetime of travel and working on expeditions and the whole joy and pleasure and wonderful opportunity of work in National Geographic, what is your favorite picture? And I instantly show this one because this is me diving in the Arctic, being bitten on the head by my dog. He was so pleased to see me come up after dives that he would go absolutely crazy. And on this particular dive, the last dive of the project, which was about 3 years ago, he hung on to me, and I've still got the scars on my head. So in honor of my dog up there, I present this as my favorite picture at the moment. Thanks very much. And I showed you at the beginning that we've protected about 6 million square kilometers. Well, just today, have a look at the news if you haven't already, but there's a small island group called Tristan da Cunha in the South Atlantic that we've finally got it agreed that, and they have now established the largest marine protected area in the Atlantic at 700,000 square kilometers. I led that expedition 2 years ago, and it's now been agreed as the largest marine protected area in the Atlantic, 700,000 square kilometers, which is 90% of the Tristan da Cunha water. So it feels like a day of great celebration. Firstly, because I'm speaking to you and sharing my passion for exploration, and secondly, because we've just got this signed in as one of the world's largest wildlife sanctuaries. So there you go. Thank you very much indeed for joining me, for letting me come in and share my stories with you. And I'm now ready for your comments, questions, or advice.
All right, Paul. Well, thanks for taking us on a virtual expedition out to sea with you. And a huge congrats to the whole Pristine Seas team with that announcement. It's always great news to hear more of our ocean is protected. And you know, as you said before, as Enrique said before on some of our events, the ocean's resilient, and if we give it space and we protect it, it can bounce back in incredible ways. So thank you so much for the work you do, Paul, and sharing it with us today.
Great to be here.
All right. Well, let's start hanging out with some classrooms. We've got classrooms joining us from all over the place. So YouTube, I see questions coming in already. Keep those coming in. But let's start off with the live group here. Let's go to, let's see. Let's go to Mrs. Allen's group, 4-5s hanging out in Ontario here in Canada. I'm going to bring them in here. How are we doing in grade 4-5s?
Hiya.
All right. Who's got a question?
Do you guys have a question? Somebody, Kaylin.
Come nice and close so we can hear you nice and loud.
We can hear, they can hear you. Go quick, run. Loud voice.
How long do you want to keep on scuba diving?
Did you hear that, Paul? How long do you want to keep diving?
Oh, it's a great question. Thank you so much. I'm going to keep going for as long as I possibly can. I'm still a diver. I've been diving since 1969, and you got to touch wood when you say this. I'm still fit and healthy enough to keep diving, so I'm just going to keep diving, and keep on diving.
All right, perfect. I'm going to grab a question over here from YouTube. This is Mr. DeCoster's group. They're tuning in live. They've got a few questions here, but let's start off with, they're curious about how much of the ocean has been protected. How much of the ocean at this stage has been protected? We know, the amazing work Pristine Seas has done. How does that stack up with the global scale?
At the minute, it's still only about 7% because the ocean is so big. The ocean is so incredibly vast. And you would think that with all this work going on and all of this terrific awareness raising going on everywhere, that there would be more protected, but it's still only about 7%. There's a lot of work to do. And I would say it's going to take some years. It's going to really take some years before we get to that 30%, but we'll get it. We will get 30% by 2030. We're all doing our bit, and lots of people are also doing their bit. But at the minute, it's still only about 7%, which seems amazing, doesn't it?
All right. Well, we truly live on a blue planet, so 7% is a great start. But you're right. I think we're just going to see more and more kind of snowball over the next while. Let's head to Pennsylvania. We've got Miss Spiegel joining us with her 5th grade class. They're joining virtually. How are you doing today?
Hi, we're doing great. Okay, so we have a question that says, how long does it take to reserve a zone in the ocean to protect it?
Thank you. What a terrific question. Every single one is so very different because once we get the science work done and the science report is shared everywhere, which of course is helpful that we can also tell it by compelling media. We can use compelling media to tell these essential science stories. Each country has its own method to bring it in because it's their waters after all. With Tristan da Cunha, the one I mentioned at the end, it took about 3 years to get it in. With the Seychelles, I think it took about 1.5 years. Each country has its own method. With Russia, our project there in Franz Josef Land, it was about 1 year because these are legally binding agreements and they shouldn't be rushed. So they're quite long processes. The expeditions take 1 year or so to put together on average. Then we're at sea for, say, a month or a month and a bit. And then there's this moment where all of the politicians and all of the global leaders have got to get together and work it out. So it's quite the moment. So that's why I'm in a very celebratory mood today, because we've just pushed a very big one over the edge.
All right. Very cool. We're going to jump to another live group now. We're going to go to, I should say Mr. Coster's group, a shout out there in Michigan. So great to have the group joining us in Michigan. Let's take a little visit now to Mrs. Roberts' group. They're joining virtually, grade 8s here in Ontario, Canada. Let's bring them in. How are we doing today?
Great. How are you guys?
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, that was very interesting. We actually have I have a live chat going on the side of my laptop, and I'm trying to collect all the questions from the students. So there's a start.
All right. Well, why don't you pick one or two of your favorites and we'll get those started.
What is the most dangerous experience you've had when you've been out on the ocean?
Well, yeah, I've had a few. I mean, I managed to get lost underneath an iceberg in Antarctica once. I was diving in open water and didn't expect any ice to come above me, but a long way away, an iceberg broke off from the ice foot and drifted over my position, and it was an enormous iceberg. And when I came up, instead of popping into open water, I banged my head and no idea which way to go. And it was very complicated to get out from that, because which way is the right way? Which way is the shortest way? Which way is a long way? Which is the way that is so long we're going to run out of air? So but very luckily managed to come up the right side of it. So that's probably my most hairiest underwater experience. And the rest of the time, as you can well imagine, not every day at sea is beautiful weather, flat, calm seas and warm, and hanging around in shorts and a pair of t-shirts after every dive. We have our fair share of thumping bad weather. But yeah, I think the most dangerous thing I've done in the sea is get lost under an iceberg.
All right. Well, I think that classifies as a pretty dangerous experience, but everything worked out, so that's good. And I'm sure your training kicked in too, right? And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's so important to always be training and always be keeping current. Mr. Smith's class is joining us virtually. They are in Toronto, and they're curious, on expedition, are you ever bored when you're out at sea, and what do you do to fill some of the time?
That's a great question, because of course on some of the passages, they're like long passages. And the Tristan da Cunha one, it's 1 week from South Africa to even get to the island. And it's wonderful being at sea. It's great being at sea because you're moving along. There's the, occasional looking at whales or whatever comes along, seabirds, and the sense of travel. It's a very peaceful life. Or when I've been working down in Antarctica, there are moments when you have to accept that you're stuck in the ice. So maybe stuck in the ice for 10 days while you just wait for the ice to ease and the ship to work its way out of that. So on any expedition, there are periods of calm and peace. But then that quickly can, as you say, lead into boredom, a sense of, wow, what do we do now? So my trick with being a bit bored is to be useful. It's the same technique as we're using here during COVID-19. I mean, I'd much rather be at sea than be not. But it means you just got to keep yourself useful, do things that are useful. So at sea, it's making sure that all the equipment is organized, that we're going to be completely ready when we arrive at the destination, that everything is secured during the bad weather, isn't rocking around. Or when I'm in camp and the snow's coming down and you're stuck in bad weather, getting out, shoveling the snow regularly, checking the tent, cooking great food, just being useful without driving everybody around you crazy by being too active. So there's a sense of accepting what's happening. You can't change the storm. You can't suddenly get to your destination quicker. So you can't change that. You have to accept that, but do a really good job of managing the things that you can change.
All right. Good stuff. We're going to take a little trip to Peterborough, Ontario here. We've got Mr. Douglas's group, their Youth Leadership and Sustainability. How's everyone doing today? Oh, can you unmute for me, Mr. Douglas?
Okay.
There we go. Hey, Peterborough.
Hi. I was just wondering what you studied post-secondary to prepare for your job, like your diving and all the expeditions and everything.
All right, Paul, what'd you study after in university? Did you go to university? What'd you study?
Oh, no, that's a lovely question. Thank you. No, I didn't go to university. I left school at 15. I was so terrible at school that I was just desperate to leave. And in those days, you could leave if you passed something. So I managed to pass metalwork, and that remains my highest academic qualification to date, metalwork. I left at 15. I went to work for a local butcher delivering meat on a bicycle. And then I got an apprenticeship at Ford Motor Company as a toolmaker, which I absolutely loved. And in that toolmaking apprenticeship for 4 years, it was where I learned to dive and climb. And it was there, yeah. So I went from school at 15, delivering meat on a bicycle, a toolmaking apprenticeship, to being a toolmaker, working in the UK and in the US, and then finally escaped the classic work environment to be an explorer.
All right. And I think that's so important to share, Paul, because there is no one right way to get into science and exploration. There's so many. I mean, anybody you talk to has a different story of changing ideas, changing career paths. I know people have studied architecture, but now they're working ocean plastics around the world. So, there is no right or wrong way to follow your passion.
You're absolutely right, John. I love to share it because I meet people all the time who are looking to work in amazing places, or looking to work in science, or looking somehow to, what can we do to play my part in climate change? What can I do to play my part in the loss of biodiversity? And it's always, well, work in science, but you can work in science as a truck driver. You can work in science as a pilot, or a builder, or a carpenter, or any skill is needed in science work. So I always say to young ones, if I can, find something that you like to do and then work out how to apply it to science, because it's not that difficult. And that's your route into an exciting life, really.
All right. We're going to grab another question from YouTube. This is from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Mrs. Kalem's class is joining us. And they've got a two-parter for you. They're wondering if you have a favorite expedition place to visit, and if on any of your expeditions you've seen a great white shark.
Yeah, the favorite place to visit has to be Antarctica. I mean, I've been lucky. I've worked all over the world in lots of remote, challenging, and undeniably beautiful places. But because Antarctica is so very special, and I've had so many years working down there, and it genuinely is a difficult place to get to, then there is something very special about Antarctica. So I guess if I had to choose one place, it would be Antarctica. And no, I've never seen a great white shark. I seem to have seen lots of other sharks, but I've never seen a great white shark in the flesh. One time off the coast of Australia in the Coral Sea, which is outside of the Barrier Reef. It's about 200 miles off Australia. I was diving with my son some years ago, and I thought the world's largest great white shark was coming at us very fast. So I swam outside of Scott in a way to sort of protect him from what I thought was the world's fastest, biggest, and ugliest great white shark. But I mistook it. It was actually our diving ship coming towards us and not the shark.
All right. Well, Paul, I want to say too, we've got some international viewers. A shout out to Russia and India. We've got people tuning in from both of those spots today, which is great. We're going to head to, where's my list? There we go. We're going to head to Louisiana to visit Mr. Dupuis. Let me bring him in here. His class is virtual today. How you doing, Mr. Dupuis?
Doing great, thanks. Want to ask Paul, do you ever take teachers who dive on your expeditions?
Yes. Yes, we do. And one of the best things we do, is when we're in our host country, is when we can have our hosts in the country come with us. That's a wonderful thing. On our recent expedition to Costa Rica, the Minister of Environment, he came out, and he's a great guy because he's a man of the sea. He's a surfer and diver. So he came out and joined us for a scuba dive and also submarine. That was wonderful to see him there in his own waters, fall in love. So yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Can I
we can do.
Sorry, Paul, your microphone went a little bit funny on us. Can you try talking again?
Oh, yeah. So, yes, we do. We do everything we can to get teachers with us in the water.
All right, perfect. That's better. You went all robot on us. It was kind of cool, but it's much better to hear the full answer. So, yeah, very cool. And so that leads to a question online. A lot of Canadian classes tuning in. They're wondering, so this is from Toronto, are there any expeditions planned for Canadian waters at some stage?
That's a really good point. Well, I guess we were in your waters up to a point where we were in Nunavut, Arctic Canada, and this was 3 years ago on our last ice expedition. I absolutely loved it. I'd not been up there before, and it's where I showed you the picture of the dog biting me on the head. And there's a bit in the Arctic that will be what we call the last ice. So the current forecast is that around about 2040 there won't be any more proper sea ice in the Arctic in the summer. So we won't get this multi-year ice that is so important to life up there. But there is a bit that will retain a lot of ice, and they call it the last ice. And it's sort of northwestern Greenland, northeastern Canada, that bit up there. So we had an expedition there to work with the Canadian people and the Nunavut people to understand it more and help get it protected. And I'm very happy to say that it was protected last year. So that was our first go into Canadian waters. I absolutely loved it and welcome the opportunity in getting back there.
All right. Well, it sounds like it's a successful first go. Very cool. So give me a wave, classrooms. We're going to squeeze in a couple more before we wrap up today. So give me a wave if I should come back to you for another question. All right. Let's go back to Pennsylvania first.
Okay, I'm just getting the question up. Have you ever found any new sea creatures in any of your dives that were not explored before or found of?
Yes, we have. In fact, there's so little known about the ocean that we regularly find new species. And it's really something. It's one of the greatest things to come up and say to the chief scientist, hey, what was that little guy? Look, they said, you know, we don't really know, but it's no doubt a new species. And it shows you just how little we do know of the ocean. For many years, I used to tell people we know and understand about 10% of the ocean. But now we've learned more, we realize that we understand less. And the current figure is that we probably understand between 5 and 7% of the ocean. So there's a lot yet to discover.
All right, we're going to go back to Anna because they have a question that kind of builds on that. So I'm going to bring them back in.
Okay. Yeah, one of my students want to ask how many ocean species you think there's still out there waiting to be discovered?
Well, you'd have to say millions. There are probably millions of species yet to be discovered because we just don't know enough about it even to make an estimate. So if you think that you like to dive or you like to be at sea or exploring wild places, the fact that there's so much to yet discover should be the final push to get you into being an ocean explorer.
All right, let's bring in our crew, our 4-5s in Amherst view. I know they have another question, so go ahead, bring someone up.
Alex. Oh. Sorry.
We can hear you. You're good.
So, what do you think is your favorite animal that you've ever found?
Favorite animal?
Yeah, your favorite encounter, Paul.
Yeah, I'd say it was the 6-gill sharks. You know, 6-gill sharks are very beautiful. Most sharks have 5 gills, but there are some very rare sharks that tend to be swimming very deep, around about 2,000 meters, 6-gill sharks. And for the BBC filming my television series Oceans, we were very lucky after a lot of work to dive with a 6-gill shark in the Mediterranean. And it was an absolutely amazing 10-minute experience for me, and one I shall never forget, and one that I hope to repeat. So just look online. There's a little film of me with it. So just look up Paul Rose 6-gill shark. There's a nice little video there.
All right, very cool. Ms. Roberts Group, do you have a final question?
Sure. We would actually like to know what the most interesting thing you've ever found in the ocean. So Have you seen shipwrecks? Have you found treasures? That sort of question.
Yeah, I've certainly found shipwrecks, which has been great. I've done a lot of shipwreck diving in the Great Lakes, actually in mostly Illinois, Wisconsin, and Michigan. But there's something wonderful about those dives I had in the Sea of Cortez, Baja, California, when at around about, I think it was about 30 meters in depth, there's these big, thick green layers where you sort of go down into this strange green, gloomy world. And I found that absolutely amazing. Similarly, in the Bahamas, there are some tiny islands there with black holes in them. And when you dive in these waters, the top part of the water is very clear. Then at about 20 meters, you go through this very corrosive, incredibly mysterious dark layer that smells of rotten eggs. So it's those water experiences and changes in the water that I found incredibly interesting and amazing, really.
Okay, one more trip to Peterborough. If you have another question, we're ready for you.
Hey, Paul, I'm curious if you could share with us which parts of the world are you seeing leading most aggressively in terms of protecting areas, and without getting yourself in trouble, which parts of the world are perhaps struggling to step forward and do what needs to happen?
That's a great question. Well, I'm speaking to you from England, and we're all sort of celebrating the fact that Britain has now protected Tristan da Cunha, as I say. So that gives the UK having protected something like 4.3 million square kilometres. So that's really brilliant, putting us on our way to 30%. Chile has done really well these years in the ocean. You've seen a lot in Costa Rica. Costa Rica does really well on land and at sea. The Seychelles are amazing. They protect over 50% of their land, and they now have protected 30% of their waters. And so there are these really bright sparks. There's a continuing problem from China with their approach to fishing in particular. And we've been very disappointed the way things have been working out in the US these last recent years, because for a long time they were leading and there was some wonderful decisions made in the ocean, and there's been some pretty appalling decisions made these last years. But it looks as if that's about to take a turn for the good.
All right. So, Paul, I'm going to grab one question to wrap us up on YouTube. This is Akash in India, and he wants to know, what drives you? What gets you up each morning and going, whether on expedition or at home? What drives you, Paul?
It's the physical engagement with the planet. I've never been much of an academic studier, but it's my physical engagement with things that drives me. For instance, if I arrive in a new place and I just need to think a bit and prepare what's coming, it's me going out for a walk or a run or something. And it's the physical side that drives me. So when I get up in the morning, if I can have a swim or a walk or a run or something, and it's what drives me with all the expedition planning, because there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of time on the laptop and meetings and paperwork and general administration. But what drives me through that is knowing at the end of it, I'm going to be on an expedition in a very exciting place doing something very useful. So I think it's the physical engagement that gets me going.
All right. Well, I'm going to start off with a huge shout out to our YouTube crowd today. Thank you so much for sending in such great questions from different countries. Shout out to our camera classroom. Always great to see classrooms, whether they're virtual or in the classroom. Thanks for your great questions. And Paul, thank you for sharing that amazing news with us today. Thanks for taking us on a little virtual expedition. And we can't wait to continue following pristine seas as, hopefully we get a little more normal over the coming months.
Great. Well, thanks everybody from YouTube and all the other channels for joining us. And as always, this man, Joe Grabowski, I love running alongside you, Joe. So let's keep in close contact and I'll see you again. So thanks very much, everybody. Brilliant stuff.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We're going to sign off for today.